Hi there guys, welcome back to another episode of 4K Garage. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. So of course we're in a little bit of a different environment today, back at home in front of my computer. So with the car now currently having its wrap done, and with the diffuser currently being painted, there isn't much left to do on the car at the very moment. So I thought I'd give you, make the next couple of episodes almost like little filler episodes, as I wanted to talk about the original history of the car. Of course, anyone that's followed me for a little while will know that there's a backstory behind just the Rocket Bunny install and everything that you've seen on this channel so far. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to go through that really, bring up the old pictures, have a little talk about them, and kind of have a little bit of a story time. So let's grab a cup of coffee, have a look at the old pictures, shall we? Right, so where do we begin? So I guess the best place to start is just prior to buying the car. I originally picked up the 86 back in 2018, just at the very beginning of it, around March. Kind of the whole reason for choosing an 86 is, well, I've always loved how they looked. I really loved how they looked at Rocket Bunny kit. I've always liked rear-wheel drive, always liked Japanese cars, which isn't something you can really get anymore. Of course, you've got the 350Z. I've never really been a massive fan of them. And at the time, I actually owned a 2003 Japanese import Subaru Impreza WRX, which being an import was a little bit quicker than a normal UK car, pushing around 300 horsepower or so. In previous owner, I'd put loads of care and attention to make it a really, really clean car. And despite the fact it had quite a few miles on it, it was through and through a pretty clean car. It looked fantastic in a nice rare red, which you don't see very often on Subarus. So alongside that, we also owned, me and my dad also owned a Vauxhall VX220 together. And that was a track car that we'd had about 6 years at this point. And that was just incredible. Rear-wheel drive, 300 horsepower, weighing around a ton, 1,000 kilos, if that. And it was just an absolute weapon. So already owning those two cars, I didn't really have a huge amount of funds to go out and buy a new or used GT86. So I was looking at crashed ones to begin with, which is when I found this. So after having a kind of saved search on eBay for a couple of months, I got a notification of a new GT86 that popped up within my budget. I can't remember what I set it to now. But it turns out it's just over £4,000. So I reached out to the seller, which happened to be a garage called Turbo Monkeys, who kind of been more well known recently for the 1UZ, supercharged 1UZ swapped BRZ. 48 hours after it being listed, deal was done, and we were going to go pick it up that weekend. So as you can see from these pictures, it was almost worse than it looked really. It was registered as category N write-off, which essentially means it's non-structural damage. So that can kind of tell you all you need to know really. I mean, the main thing about a car for me is whether the chassis is straight. Yeah, anything engine-wise, electrical, that can be fixed, that can be replaced. But of course the chassis itself being a bit twisted is a bit of a major issue. And in this case, it's exactly what I wanted, a front-end collision. Everything on the front end did what it was meant to, crumpled in exactly the right way it was designed to crumple, and that just meant there was no damage to nothing that couldn't be replaced. So as you can see from the pictures, the front bumper was totally gone, the headlights again totally gone, crash bar did exactly what it needed to, the radiator was crunched all the way right up to the front of the engine block, but the engine still ran. Of course, without a radiator, didn't really want to run it for too long. Still drove straight. There's no suspension damage, no chassis damage. Even there, the fuse box looks pretty battered, but once everything was pulled out of the way, it was all right. So with it able to drive, we were able to get it up onto a flatbed truck and drive it to 5 hours home. As you can see, it's a pretty fun day. Hire a flatbed, never driven a flatbed truck before. Get the car up on the flatbed, drive it home. Easy. So as you can see here, once we got it back, we tucked it away in the garage. It is, of course, quite a bit different to my workspace now. Just a normal, British single garage. Plenty long for a car, but definitely not really wide enough to properly work on one in the way that I do now. But with all the damage being on the front end, it wasn't too bad to just have the door open and work away on that front end. This is exactly as we got it back, smashed up, looking worse for wear, looking quite sorry for itself to say the least. And so the first step really was to start tearing it apart. And straight away, as soon as we started taking things off, like the remnants of the front bumper, the headlights, the bonnet, it started to look a lot better. So with the main core support off, the crash bar off, the radiator, the AC condenser off, headlights off, you can really see that behind that is actually not that much more damage drilled out. You can kind of see it here how the headlight and front driver's side wing bracket is actually quite bent there, which ended up getting replaced later on. And here's the massive pile of parts that all came off. Pretty much all of this went to scrap metal place. It was all totally bent out of shape. not really reusable in any way. However, I'm not sure what the previous owner drove into. Must have been some kind of plasterboard wall or something, because the car was actually covered and even filled with plasterboard in some areas. A bit of a strange one. But the bottom of the radiator support was actually straight as an arrow. Quite surprising, really. You can see here a couple of angles, totally straight, no problems with it at all. Didn't have to do anything with that. I was worried about having to replace that whole section, but in the end, no need at all. It was level, it was straight, perfect. So now you've got to be thinking that the next step would be to start ordering new parts, and I did. But I also ordered some modifications at first. So the first modification were the rear lights. I mean, that's almost the first modification with most people on these cars. Set of clear Valentis from GT86 Speed Factory in the US, as well as their third diffuser light, the V light, as I like to call it. Still quite a little bit of modification in itself to get the V to light up with the side lights, rather than be some kind of fourth brake light. I thought it was a bit overkill. They were in, it looked fantastic. And then I started cracking into getting the bits that need to be unspot welded drilled out. So it wasn't particularly ceremonious. In the end, it was pretty much just drill those spot welds out, really just strip the front of the car totally naked. And the absolute beauty of all of this was being such a new car, being such a new chassis, it was so easy to have this document with all the part numbers, every single part of the car, go to Toyota with those part numbers, order them all, and they were here within a couple of days. Which is quite a funny little story. On the very first day, I picked up the new parts of the car, the new kind of front end structural chassis pieces. I went to a GT86 meet, but I didn't have a GT86, or at least I didn't have one I could drive. So I turned up in my Subaru. I was the second person there, parked next to the guy that organised it, and he gave me this funny old look like, is this guy lost? He's definitely not driving an 86. But funny enough, I'd introduced myself, and he'd actually already seen the beginning of the project thread. So here we are, got the parts back from Toyota, all brand new parts, all came a couple of days later, and they weren't too expensive. They come in this nice black primer finish, but I had a can of the colour match paint laying around, so I thought I'd spray them up, get them to look almost factory, or at least just red, so they don't stick out too much. Here we are, got it all laid out, ready to go back on. 90% of it is bolts, there's a couple of spot welds that need to be done. But as you can see, there was just no hassle, no drama. Everything lined up exactly how it was meant to, and that kind of told me straight away that nothing else really is bent out of shape. So with the main structure of the front end now back in place, started ordering all new exciting bits. Pile of parts that all came from GT86 Speed Factory in the US. Liked going with them because they got a massive selection of parts. So we got everything from the radiators, radiator fans, new exhaust hangers, and some other little modifications that I wanted to fit, all from them. Around that time, we had my friend come over who did the recent welding on the Rocket Bunny kit. They spot welded new front chassis parts into place, as me being productive. Of course, once that was done, we were able to get the radiator in, AC condenser in, the AC lines hooked up straight away with the new condenser, radiator fans went in, started to look like a car again pretty quickly. So one of the things I bought for the car, which of course I imagine you guys have seen by now, is the Sabon carbon bonnet. Why buy one from Toyota that's then going to have to get sprayed, so you're going to have to pay for the bonnet, you're going to have to pay for to have it painted. I thought, why not, let's buy a brand new carbon one. With the main intake and the airbox on the car being in about 1,000 pieces on the under tray when I first got it, there was no way I was going to reuse it, of course. I think I contacted Toyota about getting a new one, and due to the fact it came with the MAF sensor as a whole unit, it was going to be something ridiculous, like £400. Not sure why that is, but as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, I'll just get an aftermarket one then. So here you go, you can see I've installed in the Mishimoto air intake, got rid of that weird induction noise pipe in the engine bay, got rid of that, as you can probably tell by now. I'm quite a fan of cleaning up messy engine bays. But this is when we soon found out, when filling up the radiator for the first time, there's a big leak under the car, as you can see there. And what we had found is the rubber hose that runs from the filler neck to the engine block, and that joins up to this kind of cast aluminium water manifold that spreads coolant from one side of the block to the other. And during the crash, that hard rubber hose must have pushed that back and just kind of cracked and snapped the neck of it, as you can see looking down there between the inlet manifold. But I was able to actually get one fairly easy. It was less than £100, I believe. We were able to replace that, just take the inlet manifold off, a few bolts here and there, and the new water manifold was back in place and ready to go. Filled it with water, didn't have any more radiator related issues. With the previous issues the radiator resolved, we then ran into another issue, and that was mold. Not a particularly nice thing to deal with. Got a new car. I imagine that when it was crashed, the windows were left down or even slightly open, and just maybe it sat there for a day or two, and rainwater had got into the car and under the seat. Had to get the seat out, but some numpty had already tried taking it out. I can only imagine using a normal hex socket on the Torx-headed bolts that hold the seat down, and they were totally rounded off. Even with the proper Torx bit, they were too long gone. Trying to use bolt extractors didn't help, just rounded it even further. And in the end, I ended up drilling the top out of one. As I reversed the drill, it caught, snapped the drill bit, but took the bolt with it, so that was good. And on the other one, I ended up dremeling off the entire head of the bolt, and it still was really tight, even though I had nothing clamping down on it anymore. And then ended up just drilling the head up of that one as well, and was able to get it out. And really, then I just had to start the absolutely horrible job of dealing with this mold. But did a little bit of research. Found out white vinegar is very good for killing off mold. Soaked the areas of white vinegar, carpet of the car, the back of the seat, and then with a vacuum and a stiff brush, I was able to sweep up and get rid of any of those mold spores. And if you look now, it's clear. Couldn't even tell it was there. Quite pleased with that. And another issue I found, I think it was probably the last issue of the whole rebuild, was two cam oil solenoids right in front of the cams, and the electrical connectors on them are so weak it's really easy to break them. So many brands sell all these covers to protect them and make them look a little bit nice. I was able to end up getting them both for £90 from Japan, brand new. As you can see, nice and shiny, which totally contrasts the scabby, rusty ones on the other side. But then I was finally able to start going into the final parts of the rebuild. Just small little jobs, like here I had to replace the coolant overflow tank. So just picked up this generic one, made a bracket for it, a couple of hoses. It just sits in the engine bay looking nice and smart, really. And then the next thing was the bigger one, really. Starting to get some body panels on the car. Here we have my dad helping me fit the arch liners. Well, we've got a used front driver side wing, which I think I was able to pick up for about £85. It already was red, the colour matched perfect, and that was great, really. That went straight on, no problems at all. So I'd already been planning to rocket bunny the car since day one, really. I knew that was something that I really wanted to do, so I didn't see any reason to ever bother replacing the front bumper mounted side indicators, not to mention the wiring for those have been torn out, which just gave me more excuse to fit these side fender garnish indicators from Intech. With the carbon fibre bonnet fitted, it really was beginning to look like a car again, just missing its front bumper, headlights and the other front wing. Absolutely fantastic, fitted out with some gas struts, and the fitment I would say is 90% there. One side is a little bit tight and the other side's a little bit, the gap's a little bit larger. I've tried wiggling it in the last couple of years that I've owned the car, back and forth, loosening this and tightening that, and there's still a couple of gaps, but I'm happy to kind of live with those as they are, really. And here we are, another modification. So there's a funny story behind this one, and one I always tell to almost everyone that asks me about it. Everyone always asks me, what is the exhaust? Why do you have a single exit? I cannot remember the guy that was doing it, but there was someone on the forums at the time who had this GT86. He was building into this full-on turbocharged race car, essentially. He had the entire chassis stripped down to a bare shell. He had all these forged internals ready to go. And then he just kind of stopped the project. And one of the parts he had was this HKS catback exhaust, which, it's HKS, it's a good brand, it's a single exit, which I love. I always just think Japanese cars should have a single exit exhaust, depending on the number of cylinders they have. And I looked it up and it's brand new. As you can see, it's still in the box, still sealed by HKS. And they went for something like £750 at the time. I remember messaging him at the time saying, look, I know this is a bit of a ridiculous offer, but will you take £400 for it? He said no. Fair enough, I thought. But then I saw it on eBay, and the time had passed and there was no bidders. Starting price £350, no reserve. Put one bid on and it was mine, 350 quid. Well, chuffed with that. And then the last big step of the entire fixing process was the interior. Anyone that's replaced airbags in a car may know that, of course, the airbags are their own little unit and they're tucked away under the dash and the steering wheel and so on, and they can often be replaced without having to replace the entire dashboard. The panels are often removable exactly for that reason. However, not in the 86. The airbag is quite literally designed to punch a great big hole through the middle of the dashboard, which is no fun. Means having to buy a whole new load of airbags, new airbag ECU, the whole shebang really. But I was able to, with the help of a friend, neither of us ever having removed the dashboard from a car before and everything involved with that. We were able to get it all out in a day and just make a massive mess of the interior. And come the next weekend, here's our big pile of parts to put back in. Here's the new dashboard. I had to replace the seatbelt tensioners, replace the airbags, just everything really. But eventually we got there. We were able to put it all back together. Eric helping me out. And so over a couple of rather warm weekends, the interior is back in one piece. Right, that's it for this episode, guys. As always, thanks for watching. I think due to the length of this episode, we're going to split it into 2, maybe even 3 parts. And I hope you enjoyed this little mini-series, just taking you through the history of the 4K GT86. Now you can see why it is what it's called. It's because we picked it up for £4,000, which I think is a pretty good bargain. But as you'll see in the next part, I'll talk about what it will cost me, the original price of the car, parts and modifications we went through, how much it cost me in the end. I've always tallied it all up, so I'll share that with you guys in the next episode. Till then, hope you stay safe. Please do subscribe, leave a comment if you enjoyed this, give the video a like. Hope to see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye bye.